Hello YouTube. In Part 9 of Don't Vote for the Douche or the Turd, I rebutted the final two Obama excuses for voting against the Born Alive Infant Protection Act. I exposed Planned Parenthood, a close ally of Obama's and his twisted pro-jet agenda, for their racism and stubborn refusal to follow even the most reasonable abortion laws, even if it means putting young girls' lives in danger. Now in Part 10, I take Obama to task for his support of Planned Parenthood. Now, I know many of you are probably thinking, oh, but Obama's too reasonable to support an organization like that. Of course, I thought the same thing when I supported him, but the facts say otherwise. Obama's radical pro-abortion philosophy came out in full force in a speech he made to Planned Parenthood on July 17, 2007, which I have a link to in the description of this video, by the way. So I decided to give a rebuttal to his propaganda during events expressions in that speech. Thanks to all of you at Planned Parenthood for all the work that you're doing for women all across this country, and families all across this country, and men who have enough sense to realize you're helping them all across this country. I want to thank Cecil Richards for her extraordinary leadership. I'm happy to see so many good friends here today, including Steve Tromblin and Pam Sutherland of my home state of Illinois. We've had a number of battles down in Springfield for many, many years, and it's wonderful to see that they're here today. Even putting aside the fact that thanking Planned Parenthood for their work it has supposedly done for women is not much different from thanking the Ku Klux Klan for lynching blacks. Obama's acknowledgement of Steve Tromblin and Pam Sutherland, two bigwigs in the Illinois state chapter of Planned Parenthood, as not only political allies but as good friends, as he so clearly put it, is a blatant contradiction of his claim of, I don't know anyone who's pro-abortion. Sadly, yet despite the evidence to the contrary, Barack Goebbels Obama has managed to fool millions of Americans with that and other shameless lies. Will our daughters grow up with the same opportunities as our sons? Will our daughters have the same rights, the same dreams, the same freedoms to pursue their own versions of happiness? I wonder, because there's a lot at stake in this country today, and there's a lot at stake in this election, especially for our daughters. Obama has combined three classics in this one. First, there's the what about the children argument that politicians misuse all the time, and the gender identity propaganda that has unfortunately defined much of the modern feminist movement. And of course, the typical moral relativism of what's wrong for you is not wrong for me that has hijacked the modern left and infested it like a cancer and has helped plummet our nation into an ethical sewer. Each classic, of course, trivializes the horror of abortion, which Barack Goebbels Obama and everyone he knows supposedly acknowledges. Some people argue that the federal ban on abortion was just an isolated effort aimed at one medical procedure, that it's just not part of a conceited effort to roll back the hard-won rights of American women. That presumption is also wrong. Barack Goebbels Obama has once again lied. There's no comprehensive federal ban on abortion. I repeat, none. This argument is nothing more than baseless fear-mongering designed to fire up his nutjob base. The so-called ban Obama is referring to is the partial birth abortion ban, which actually is a particular abortion procedure, and a particularly brutal one at that. That is typically done in the third trimester and late second trimester. This is a description of partial birth abortion, or to use a medical term, intact dilation and extraction abortion, from medicaldictionary.freedictionary.com. Intact DNX, or partial birth abortion, first involves administration of medications to cause the cervix to dilate, usually over the course of several days. Next, the physician rotates the fetus to a footling breech position. The body of the fetus is then drawn out of the uterus, feet first, until only the head remains inside the uterus. Then the physician uses an instrument to puncture the base of the skull, which collapses the fetal head. Typically, the contents of the fetal head are then partially suctioned out, which results in the death of the fetus and reduces the size of the fetal head enough to allow it to pass through the cervix. The dead and otherwise intact fetus is then removed from the woman's body. Or if that's not clear enough, the unborn child is stabbed in the head, has his skull crushed and brain scrambled and sucked out through a vacuum. Even many who identify as pro-choice, like the late Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, who quote what I just described to you as, quote, too close to infanticide, are opposed to legalization of this method except in the most extreme cases, being when the mother's life is in danger. He dismissed as mere preferences the reasoned judgments of the nation's doctors. We've seen time after time their last few years and the president says otherwise. When the science is inconvenient, when the facts don't match up with their ideology, they're cast aside. Well, it's time for us to change that. It's time for a different attitude in the White House. It's time for a different attitude in the Supreme Court. It's time to turn the page and write a new chapter in American history. I find that the most interesting accusation from someone who is not only arrogant enough to deny the scientific fact that life begins at conception, but even the undeniable fact that an infant born alive after a failed abortion attempt, which we have known long before modern medical science, is a living, breathing human being. I challenge Senator Obama, though I doubt he will accept it, even if he manages to find this video, to put his money where his mouth is and teach our children actual science by making basic embryology from the moment of conception until birth part of his sex education plan. If abortion is really a choice, then shouldn't we make sure our children are informed of what that choice entails, especially in their most impressionable years? Anyway, let's continue with this rebuttal. We know that 5 men don't know better than women and their doctors what's best for women's health. We know whether or not women have equal rights under the law. This again goes to a question I asked earlier. What doctors? A true doctor follows the Hippocratic Oath, which explicitly says, do no harm. The only situation in which the health argument is a credible one is where the continuation of the pregnancy would cause death or permanent physical injury to the woman. We know it's not just one decision. It's the blow dealt to equal pay in the Ledbetter v. Goodyear case. It's the blow dealt to integration of the school desegregation case. It's an approach to the law that favors the powerful over the powerless, that holds up a flawed ideology over the rights of the individual. We don't see America in these decisions. That's not who we are as a people. We're a country founded on the principle of equality and freedom. We're a country that's fought generation after generation to extend equality to the many, now restricted to the few. We've been there before, and we're not going back. In other words, according to Barack Goebbels Obama, if you have even the slightest concern about abortion, then you must automatically be a backward racist and misogynist that's part of some Illuminati-style conspiracy to drive civil rights and women's rights back to the Stone Ages. It's comments like this which prove that Obama's campaign promises of uniting the country across ideological divides are every bit the cynical political calculation as George W. Bush's 2000 campaign promise to restore honor and integrity to the White House, and his 2004 campaign of protecting moral values, while advancing the most morally bankrupt administration in the history of this country. Obama then contradicted himself with the following statement. There will always be people, many of goodwill, who do not share my view on the issue of choice. On this fundamental issue, I will not yield, and Planned Parenthood will not yield. But that doesn't mean that we can't find common ground, because we know that what's at stake is more about whether or not a woman can choose an abortion. So all pro-lifers may be the moral equivalent of racists and misogynists, but many of them are still people of goodwill, which is about as consistent as giving someone an olive branch with one hand and flipping them off with the other. Obama, like far too many in Washington, wants to be all things to all people, when that is really impossible. When you are all things to all people, you are nothing to nobody. That is all for Part 10 of Don't Vote for the Douche or the Turd. Stay tuned for Part 11, where I continue my rebuttal of Barack Goebbels Obama's speech to Planned Parenthood last year.